The text message hit my phone at 2:47 a.m. Unusual activity detected on account ending in 4829. Log in to review. My heart stopped. Account 4829 was the retirement fund I'd spent 10 years building for my parents. Every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every sorry I can't afford it dinner with friends. I grabbed my laptop with shaking hands. The balance showed $811. It should have been $127,000. My name is Tatum, and I'm 33 years old. For the past decade, I've worked 2 jobs, full-time at a financial planning firm and weekends doing bookkeeping for small businesses. While my friends were getting married, buying houses, and living their lives, I was putting every spare dollar into that account. Mom and Dad deserve security after raising 2 kids on teacher salaries. I still remember the night I opened that account. I was 23, fresh out of college, sitting at their kitchen table with all the paperwork spread out. "This is for you both," I'd said, sliding the documents across the worn formica. "I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about money when you retire." Dad had tears in his eyes. Mom hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're such a good daughter," she'd whispered. "We're so lucky to have you." Now, staring at that devastating balance, I felt like I was going to throw up. I called the bank's emergency line. The automated system cheerfully informed me that a withdrawal of $126,152.77 had been processed yesterday at 3:15 p.m., authorized by account holder Nora Garcia, my mother. I threw on clothes and drove to their house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. It was almost 4 a.m., but I didn't care. I needed answers. The porch light was on when I pulled into their driveway. Through the living room window, I could see them sitting on the couch, wide awake, waiting. I used my key and walked in without knocking. "Tatum, honey!" Mom jumped up, her face bright with excitement. "We were hoping you'd come by." Dad was grinning from ear to ear, something I hadn't seen in years. On the coffee table sat a bottle of champagne, 2 glasses, and what looked like a photo album. "What did you do?" My voice came out flat, emotionless. "Oh, sweetheart, sit down." Mom patted the couch beside her. "We have the most wonderful news." "Where's my money?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Mom's smile faltered for just a second before snapping back into place. "Your money? Honey, that was the family fund. We talked about this." "No, we didn't. That was for your retirement. I've been working myself to death for 10 years to build that fund." Dad cleared his throat. "Tatum, maybe you should sit down." "I'm fine standing." "Where is it?" Mom opened the photo album with trembling hands. "Look at these beautiful pictures. Robbie's wedding was absolutely magical. The venue, the flowers, the band, everything was perfect." My stomach dropped. "You spent it on Robbie's wedding?" "It was an investment." Mom's voice got higher, more defensive. "Ruby's family is very well connected. Her father owns 3 restaurants and has connections all over the city. This marriage is going to open so many doors for Robbie." "You spent my retirement fund on a party?" "It wasn't just a party," Dad said quietly. "It was important for our family's future." I stared at the photos. My brother in his $1,000 tuxedo, his bride in what looked like a designer gown, tables decorated with flowers that probably cost more than I made in a month. "How much?" I asked. "The wedding was beautiful," Mom started. "How much did you spend?" Dad looked at his hands. "About 120,000. The room started spinning. "That was everything, every penny I saved." "Tatum, you have to understand," Mom said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "Robbie needed this. He's starting his life, building his career. You're already established. You're independent. You don't need—" "I don't need what? Security? A future? The money I worked for?" "You're alone," Mom said, and her words hit like a slap. You'll be fine on your own. But Robbie has a wife now and hopefully children someday. This was an investment in the family's future. The front door opened and Robbie walked in, still glowing from his honeymoon tan. Tatum, perfect timing. He crossed the room and pulled me into a hug that felt like a python's grip. I wanted to thank you for making all this possible. The wedding was incredible, and Ruby's dad was so impressed. He's already talking about bringing me into one of his businesses. He stepped back, hands on my shoulders, beaming. You're the best sister ever. I know you sacrificed a lot over the years, and I want you to know it wasn't for nothing. This is going to change everything for our family. I looked at his face, genuinely grateful, completely oblivious to what had just been stolen from me. Then I looked at my parents sitting there with their champagne and their photo album, waiting for me to smile and celebrate. Something cold settled in my chest, something that felt like the opposite of love. I need to go, I said. But we haven't even opened the champagne, Mom called as I headed for the door. I drove home in silence, my mind completely blank. It wasn't until I was sitting in my apartment at 5 a.m. staring at my laptop screen that the thoughts started coming. They weren't the thoughts of a loving daughter anymore. I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee and staring at bank statements until the sun came up. When my phone rang at 8 a.m., I almost didn't answer. Tatum? Mom's voice was cautious. You left so suddenly last night. We're worried about you. Are you? Of course we are. You seemed upset. I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to me. Upset. Yeah, that's one word for it. Honey, I think you're overreacting. This is good news for the whole family. Ruby's father, Quincy, he's already invited us to dinner next week. He wants to discuss business opportunities with your father. What business opportunities? Dad's a retired high school math teacher. Well, maybe consulting or something. The point is, doors are opening because of this wedding, because of what we invested. What you stole. The line went quiet for a long moment. I think you need to come over so we can talk about this properly, Mom said finally. No. Tatum, I said no. I hung up and turned off my phone. By noon, I was sitting in Fiona's law office, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea I hadn't touched. They spent all of it. Fiona leaned back in her chair, her expression somewhere between shocked and furious. Every penny, 10 years of work gone in one day. Jesus, Tatum, I'm so sorry. Fiona had been my best friend since college. She was the only person who knew exactly how much I'd sacrificed for that fund. She'd watched me turn down trips, dates, promotions that would have required relocating, all to stay close and keep building that nest egg. What are my options? I asked. Legally, it's complicated. Your name was on the account, but so was your mother's. Technically, she had the right to withdraw the money, even though I was the only one putting money in. That's where it gets tricky. You'd have to prove the money was yours, not a gift to your parents. Do you have documentation showing your intent? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken of my old planning documents. I kept everything, every deposit slip, every transfer record, every email where I talked about building their retirement fund. Fiona studied the documents. This helps, but a civil suit would be expensive and time-consuming. And messy. Family court is brutal. What about criminal charges? Theft? Again, with her name on the account, it's not technically theft. The bank followed proper procedures. I felt something crack inside my chest, so they just get away with it. I didn't say that. Fiona's voice got quieter. There might be other angles to consider. Like what? Well, if they use that money for something that could be considered a gift to your brother, there might be tax implications. The IRS has rules about large gifts between family members. I sat up straighter. What kind of rules? If your parents paid for a wedding that cost over a certain amount and your brother was the beneficiary, That could be considered a gift. Gifts over $17,000 per year have to be reported. Gifts over the lifetime exemption limit, which is about $12 million, are taxable. But this was only $120,000, right? But here's the thing. If they didn't report it properly, or if they can't prove the money was legitimately theirs to give, the IRS gets very interested. They don't like unreported gifts, especially large ones. I felt a spark of something that might have been hope. What would happen? Penalties, interest, possible audit. If they can't prove the source of the funds or justify the gift, it could get expensive fast. How expensive? Depends on how deep the IRS wants to dig, but penalties for unreported gifts can be substantial, plus interest, plus the cost of dealing with an audit. I stared at her. You're talking about revenge? I'm talking about following the law. If your parents made a large gift and didn't report it properly, that's their problem, not yours. My phone buzzed. A text from Robbie. Hey sis, can we talk? Mom said you were upset about something. I showed Fiona the message. He doesn't even know, does he? She said. Know what? That the money came from you. He thinks your parents just had $120,000 lying around. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He has no idea what I sacrificed. None of them do. I thought about Robbie's grateful hug, his talk about family investments and open doors. He genuinely believed our parents had funded his fairy tale wedding out of their own resources. What would I need to do? I asked. Hypothetically. Fiona pulled out a legal pad. Hypothetically, you'd need to document everything, prove the money was yours, show the transfer to your brother was a gift, and file the appropriate forms with the IRS. Forms? Form 3520 for starters. It's for reporting large gifts. If your parents didn't file it and you have evidence they should have, the IRS would be very interested in that information. I picked up my tea and finally took a sip. It was cold, but I barely noticed. How long would something like that take? The IRS? They move fast when money's involved, especially unreported money. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Robbie. Mom's really worried. She says you're not answering calls. Everything okay? I looked at Fiona. I need copies of everything, every form, every regulation, every piece of documentation I'd need. Tatum, are you sure about this? Once you start down this road? They made their choice, I said. Now I'm making mine. 3 days later, I was sitting in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes I'd never bothered to move out. Mom had finally worn me down with her calls, and I'd agreed to come over to talk things through properly. The room looked exactly the same as when I'd left for college. Pale yellow walls, twin bed with the floral comforter, my high school honor roll certificate still hanging crooked on the wall. Down the hall, Robbie's room had been converted into Dad's home office years ago. I found your old photo albums, Mom said, settling beside me on the bed with a shoebox. I thought maybe looking at some memories would help you understand. She opened the box and pulled out a picture from my high school graduation. There I was in my cap and gown, standing between my parents, all of us beaming. You were always so responsible, Mom said softly, even as a little girl. Remember when you were 8 and you started that savings jar for the family vacation? I remembered. I'd saved my allowance for 6 months dreaming of Disney World. When I finally had enough, Mom had used the money to buy Robbie a new bike instead. You said we needed the bike more than a vacation, I said. Well, we did. Robbie's old one was falling apart, and you were always so understanding about these things. She flipped to another photo, my college graduation. I was alone in this one, holding my diploma. My parents had missed the ceremony because Robbie had a baseball tournament that same weekend. We were so proud of you, Mom continued, getting that job right out of school, being so independent. Where were you when this was taken? Mom glanced at the photo and her smile faltered slightly. Oh, that was the weekend of Robbie's championship game. You understood why we couldn't make it? Did I have a choice? Tatum, what's gotten into you? You're being so negative about everything. I pulled out another photo, my 25th birthday party. It was just me and two co-workers at a restaurant. My family had forgotten entirely because it was the same day as Robbie's engagement party. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, honey. When was the last time you and Dad did something special for me? Just for me? She laughed nervously. What do you mean? We do things for you all the time. Like what? Well, we always include you in family dinners, and we ask about your work. That's not what I meant. Tatum, I don't understand what you're getting at. I stood up and walked to my old desk, where a stack of birthday cards sat in a neat pile. I'd kept every one my parents had given me over the years. I pulled out the most recent one. Happy birthday, Tatum. Hope your day is special. Love, Mom and Dad. Generic drugstore card, no personal message, signed in Mom's handwriting. I grabbed another one from 3 years ago. Happy birthday, Tatum. Another year older. Love, Mom and Dad. Same handwriting, same generic sentiment. I pulled out Robbie's birthday card from last year, which I'd found mixed in with mine. To our amazing son on his special day, we're so proud of the man you've become and all your accomplishments. Your future is so bright, and we can't wait to see what this new year brings. You've always been our shining star. All our love, Mom and Dad. I held both cards up. Do you see the difference? Mom's face went red. Those are just cards, Tatum. No, they're not. They're proof. Proof of what? That I've never been your daughter. I've been your retirement plan. That's not fair, isn't it? I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. Mom, I need you to be honest with me. When you took that money, did you think about what it meant to me? Of course I did. Really? Because when I asked where it went, you called it the family fund, like it was never mine to begin with. Mom twisted her hands in her lap. It was for the family. You're part of this family. Am I? Because it feels like I'm just the person who pays for everyone else's dreams. You're being dramatic. I worked 2 jobs for 10 years, Mom. 10 years? I haven't taken a real vacation since college. I've never owned a new car. I live in a studio apartment with furniture from garage sales, and I did it all gladly because I thought I was building something for you and Dad. You were. No, I was building something for Robbie, just like I always have. The front door slammed, and we heard Robbie's voice echoing through the house. Mom? Dad? You here? In Tatum's room, Mom called back. Robbie appeared in the doorway, still in his work clothes, looking concerned. Hey, what's going on? Dad said you two were having some kind of heart-to-heart. We're just looking at old photos, Mom said quickly. Robbie's eyes landed on the birthday cards scattered on the bed. He picked up his card and read it, then grabbed one of mine. Wow, Mom, you really phoned it in on Tatum's cards, huh? He laughed, but it sounded forced. They're fine, Mom said defensively. Another year older? Come on. He looked at me. Is this what you're upset about? Birthday cards? It's not about the cards, Robbie. Then what? Mom said you were mad about the wedding, but I don't get it. You should be happy for me. I stared at him, my little brother, golden boy, the one who'd never had to work for anything because I was always there to pick up the slack. Do you know where the money for your wedding came from? What do you mean? Mom and Dad paid for it. With what money? He shrugged. Their savings, I guess. They said they'd been putting money aside. They don't have savings, Robbie. Dad's pension barely covers their mortgage. His smile faded. What are you talking about? I looked at Mom, giving her one last chance to tell the truth. She stared at her hands. The money came from me, I said. Every penny. I've been building a retirement fund for them for 10 years, and they spent it all on your wedding. Robbie's face went white. That's not Mom? It was family money, Mom said weakly. No, I said, standing up. It was my money, my sacrifice, my future, and now it's gone. The room went completely silent. Robbie looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. I didn't know, he whispered. Of course you didn't, I said. You never had to know. That's the point. I walked past both of them toward the door. Where are you going? Mom called. Home. I have work to do. I spent the next week turning my dining table into a war room. Bank statements, tax documents, receipts, emails, everything spread out in neat piles. Fiona had given me a thick folder of IRS forms and regulations, and I was working through them methodically. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Robbie, but I ignored them all. The doorbell rang on Saturday morning. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there with 2 coffee cups and a bag from my favorite bakery. I know you're in there, he called. Your car's in the driveway. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Peace offering? He held up the coffee and pastries. I got those cinnamon rolls you like. What do you want, Robbie? To talk, to understand what happened. I stepped aside and let him in. His eyes immediately went to my dining table covered in paperwork. Jesus, Tatum, what is all this? Research. He set the coffee down and picked up one of the IRS forms. Form 3520? What's this for? Reporting large gifts. Gifts? He looked confused. What gifts? Your wedding. If Mom and Dad paid for it with money that wasn't theirs and you were the beneficiary, that's technically a gift. Gifts over a certain amount have to be reported to the IRS. The color drained from his face. Are you serious? Very. Tatum, you can't be thinking of what? Following the law? He sat down heavily in one of my chairs. This is insane. We're family. Are we? I pulled out my laptop and showed him the spreadsheet I'd been working on. Look at this. Every deposit I made into that account for 10 years, every overtime shift, every weekend job, every sacrifice, it's all documented. He scrolled through the numbers, his expression getting more stricken with each line. I had no idea it was this much. $127,000 plus interest. Tatum, I'm so sorry. If I had known, you would have what? Said no to the fancy wedding? Told Mom and Dad you didn't need their money? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. That's honest, at least. Look, what if I pay you back? Ruby and I could take out a loan or something. With what income? You're still working at that marketing firm making $40,000 a year. Ruby's dad might give me a job. Might? Based on what? Your impressive work history of 3 different jobs in 5 years? He flinched. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Robbie. That's the point. My phone rang. Mom's name appeared on the screen. Don't answer it, Robbie said quickly. Why not? Because she's freaking out. She's been calling me nonstop since you left the other day, asking what you meant about the money being yours. I answered the call and put it on speaker. Tatum, honey, I'm so glad you picked up. I've been thinking about our conversation and I realized there might have been some miscommunication. What kind of miscommunication? Well, about the retirement fund. I think you might have gotten the wrong impression about whose money it was. Robbie was shaking his head frantically, but I kept talking. What impression should I have gotten? That it was a family fund. We all contributed to it over the years. Really? Show me your contributions. Well, we contributed by raising you and supporting you. Mom, I have 10 years of bank records. Every single deposit came from my accounts. You and Dad never put a penny into that fund. The line went quiet. That's not how I remember it, she said finally. Then your memory is wrong. Tatum, you're being very hurtful right now. Am I? Or am I being accurate? Robbie grabbed the phone. Mom, I'm here too. We need to figure this out. Oh, Robbie, thank goodness. Maybe you can talk some sense into your sister. Actually, Mom, I think Tatum has a point. I saw the records. She really did put in all that money. But it was for the family. No, I said, taking the phone back. It was for you and Dad's retirement, not for Robbie's wedding, not for impressing his in-laws, for your security when you got older. We can still use it for that. With what money? You spent it all. Well, maybe Robbie and Ruby can help us when we need it. I looked at Robbie, who was staring at the floor. And can you? I asked him. I don't know. Maybe. Ruby's family has money. Ruby's family's money isn't your money. And even if it was, you think they're going to support Mom and Dad indefinitely? I don't know, Tatum. I'm trying to figure this out too. Here's what I figured out, I said. Mom and Dad made a choice. They chose to gamble their future on your marriage to a rich girl. They chose to spend money that wasn't theirs without asking. They chose to lie about where it came from. We didn't lie, Mom's voice came through the speaker. We just didn't think you'd understand. Understand what? That you stole from me? It wasn't stealing. Then what was it? The line went quiet again. I think, Mom said carefully, that you're overreacting to this whole situation. I hung up. Robbie was staring at me. What are you going to do? I pulled out the Form 3520 I've been filling out. I'm going to file this with the IRS on Monday. Tatum, please, think about what you're doing. I have been thinking about it for a week straight. This could ruin them. They ruined themselves. He stood up, leaving his coffee untouched. I can't believe you're actually going through with this. I can't believe it took me this long to realize what kind of family I have. He walked to the door, then turned back. What if I could get the money back somehow? What if I could make this right? How? I don't know yet, but what if I could? I looked at him, really looked at him. For just a moment he looked like the little brother I used to protect from bullies, the one I'd helped with homework and driven to baseball practice. You have until Monday, I said. That's not enough time. Then you better get started. He left without another word. I sat back down at my dining table and picked up my pen. The forms weren't going to fill themselves out. Monday came and went. No call from Robbie. I mailed the forms to the IRS on Tuesday morning, then went to work like nothing had happened. But something had changed in me. I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there. My phone started ringing Wednesday evening, Mom's number. Tatum, we need to talk. About what? Robbie told us what you're planning to do. This is going too far. I already did it, Mom. The forms were submitted yesterday. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. You actually reported us to the IRS? I reported an unreported gift. The IRS will decide what to do about it. How could you do this to your own family? The same way you could steal from me, I guess. We didn't steal. I hung up. Thursday, Robbie showed up at my office. My assistant buzzed me. Your brother's here. He says it's urgent. I found him pacing in the lobby, his hair disheveled, still wearing yesterday's clothes. We need to talk, he said. Here? Anywhere, please. I led him to a conference room and closed the door. I tried, he said immediately. I really tried to get the money back. And? Ruby's dad won't lend it to us. He says we need to learn to manage our own finances before he'll trust us with that kind of money. Smart man. I talked to the bank about a loan, but they won't approve us for that much. My credit's not great, and Ruby's is tied up in student loans. What about your parents-in-law? Couldn't they just give you the money? Robbie's face flushed. I can't ask them for $120,000, Tatum. What would I even say? Hey, my parents stole my sister's retirement fund to pay for our wedding. Can you bail us out? You could try the truth. The truth would destroy Ruby's opinion of our family. Her parents already think we're... He trailed off. What? Poor beneath them. They're just very careful about money. Quincy built his business from nothing, and he doesn't respect people who are careless with finances. Like people who spend money that isn't theirs? Exactly. He slumped in his chair. Tatum, please, there has to be another way. There was. You had until Monday to figure it out. Can't you call the IRS back? Tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. But the penalties, Mom and Dad could lose their house. They should have thought of that before they spent my money. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Riverside Cafe at 6 p.m. Come alone. Q. I stared at the message. Robbie, does Quincy have my phone number? What? No, why would he? Wait, let me see that. I showed him the text. His face went white. Oh, shit. What? He knows. Ruby's dad knows about the money. How? I don't know. Maybe Ruby figured it out. She's been asking questions about how Mom and Dad could afford such an expensive wedding on a teacher's pension. And you told her what? That they'd been saving for years. But she's smart, Tatum. She works in finance. She probably did the math. I looked at the text again. Why does he want to meet with me? I have no idea, but Quincy doesn't do anything without a reason. At 6 p.m., I walked into Riverside Cafe. Quincy was already there, sitting in a corner booth, wearing an expensive suit and reading something on his tablet. He looked up when I approached. Tatum, thank you for coming. Mr. Wallace, please call me Quincy. Sit. I slid into the booth across from him. He signaled the waitress for coffee. I'll get straight to the point, he said. I know about the retirement fund. What about it? That your parents used your money to pay for the wedding, that you reported them to the IRS, that my daughter's marriage is built on a foundation of theft and lies. I didn't say anything. Ruby doesn't know yet, he continued, but she will. She's been digging into your family's finances because something didn't add up. She's very thorough. Good for her. Indeed, she gets that from me. He leaned back. Here's my problem, Tatum. My daughter married into your family believing they were financially stable, responsible people. Now I discover they're thieves who stole from their own daughter to impress me. That about sums it up. Which puts me in an awkward position. I can't have my family associated with this kind of scandal. It's bad for business. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what's going to happen. His voice got colder. You're going to withdraw your complaint to the IRS. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of family the Garcias are. Your parents will be social pariahs. Your brother will lose any chance of a decent job. And you'll be known as the vindictive sister who destroyed her own family over money. I stared at him. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining consequences. I have connections throughout this city. One word from me and your family becomes untouchable. And if I withdraw the complaint, then this stays between us. Your parents avoid the IRS penalties. Your brother keeps his marriage and everyone moves on. What about my money? Consider it a wedding gift, a very expensive lesson in family loyalty. I picked up my coffee and took a slow sip, buying time to think. There's just one problem with your plan, Quincy. What's that? You're assuming I care more about my family's reputation than I do about justice. His eyes narrowed. Everyone cares about their family's reputation. Not everyone. I stood up. Thanks for the coffee. Tatum, sit down. We're not finished. Yes, we are. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Quincy? You might want to have that conversation with Ruby sooner rather than later, because when the IRS starts their investigation, it's all going to come out anyway. I left him sitting there, his face red with anger. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my car. The calls started immediately. First Robbie, then Mom, then Dad, then Robbie again. I let them all go to voicemail. By Friday morning, I had 17 missed calls and a dozen text messages. The last one from Robbie was just, "Call me, urgent." I was finishing my coffee when someone pounded on my door. Through the peephole, I could see Ruby standing on my porch, her face flushed and angry. I opened the door. "Ruby, we need to talk, now. Come in." She stormed past me into the living room, her designer heels clicking on my hardwood floors. She looked around at my modest apartment like she was seeing it for the first time. "Is it true?" she demanded. "Is what true?" "That my wedding was paid for with stolen money." "Technically, it wasn't stolen." "Don't give me technicalities. Did my husband's parents take money that belonged to you to pay for our wedding?" I sat down on my couch. "Yes." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "How much?" $127,000. "Jesus Christ!" She started pacing. "My father told me last night, he said you filed some kind of report with the IRS. "I did." "Do you have any idea what this means? What this could do to Robbie, to our marriage?" "I'm starting to get a picture." She whirled around to face me. "This isn't a joke, Tatum. My father is furious. He's talking about cutting ties with our entire family." "Your entire family or just mine?" "Don't be smart with me. You know what I mean." "Actually, I don't. You married Robbie, not me. This is between me and my parents." "No, it's not." She sat down across from me, her voice getting more desperate. "Don't you see? If this comes out, if there's an investigation, it reflects on all of us. My father's business, his reputation. He can't be associated with this kind of scandal. Then maybe you should have asked more questions about where the money came from." I trusted my husband's family. I thought they were honest people. "So did I." She stared at me for a long moment. "You really hate them, don't you?" "I don't hate anyone. I'm just done being their safety net." "But you're destroying innocent people in the process." "Like who?" "Like me, like Robbie. We didn't know where the money came from. Robbie's not innocent. He's 28 years old. He should have questioned how his parents suddenly had 6 figures to spend on his wedding. He trusted them. And I trusted them too. Look how that worked out." Ruby pulled out her phone. "What if I paid you back? Right now, I could transfer the money today." "You have $127,000 just sitting around?" "I have a trust fund. I could access it." I studied her face. "Why would you do that?" "To make this go away, to protect my marriage." "And then what? Your parents-in-law get away with stealing from me and you're out 6 figures?" "It's better than the alternative." "Which is?" "My father destroys your family, and probably mine too in the process." My phone rang. Fiona's name appeared on the screen. "I need to take this," I told Ruby. "Tatum?" Fiona's voice was tight. "Where are you?" "At home." "Why?" "I just got a call from someone claiming to represent Quincy Wallace. They're threatening to sue me for advising you on the IRS filing." I looked at Ruby, who was watching me intently. "On what grounds?" "They're claiming I helped you file a false report, that I'm part of some conspiracy to damage their family's reputation." "That's ridiculous." "Of course it is. But they're also threatening to file a complaint with the state bar, claiming I violated ethics rules by helping you target your own family." "Can they do that?" "They can try. It would be expensive to defend, even if it's baseless." Ruby was leaning forward, clearly trying to hear both sides of the conversation. Fiona, I'm sorry. I never meant to drag you into this. I know, but Tatum, these people play hardball. They have resources and connections. Are you sure you want to keep fighting this? I looked around my small apartment, my garage sale furniture, my secondhand everything, the life I'd built on sacrifice and careful budgeting. Yes, I said, I'm sure. Okay, then we need to be smart about this. Don't talk to anyone from their side without me present, and document everything. I hung up and turned back to Ruby. Your father's going after my lawyer now? He's protecting his interests by threatening innocent people, by doing whatever it takes to keep his family's name clean. Interesting definition of clean. Ruby stood up. Last chance, Tatum. Let me pay you back. You withdraw the complaint, and this all goes away quietly. And my parents learned nothing. Robbie learns nothing. The cycle continues. What cycle? The one where I sacrifice everything and everyone else benefits. So this is about more than money. It was always about more than money. She walked to the door, then turned back. You know, I actually feel sorry for you. Why? Because you're so focused on punishing them that you can't see you're punishing yourself too. When this is over, when the dust settles, you'll still be alone. But now you'll be alone and bitter. Maybe, but I'll also be free. She left without another word. I sat in my quiet apartment thinking about what she'd said. My phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number. This is your last warning. Drop the complaint or face the consequences. You have 24 hours. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Fiona with a note. Add this to the evidence file. Then I turned off my phone and went to make dinner. I had a feeling it was going to be a long weekend. The dinner invitation came from Mom on Sunday afternoon. Family dinner tonight at 6, her voicemail said. We need to discuss this situation like adults. Ruby and Quincy will be joining us. I almost didn't go, but something about the formal tone, the mention of Quincy being there, it felt like a trap I needed to walk into with my eyes open. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 6 p.m. 3 cars were already in the driveway, Mom's sedan, Robbie's Honda, and a black Mercedes that had to be Quincy's. The dining room table was set with Mom's good china, the kind she only used for special occasions. Everyone was already seated when I walked in, Mom and Dad at opposite ends, Robbie and Ruby on one side, Quincy across from them. The only empty chair was next to Quincy. Tatum, sweetheart, Mom said, her voice artificially bright. You look lovely. Sit, sit. I took the chair next to Quincy, who nodded politely but didn't speak. I made your favorite, Mom continued, bringing out a casserole dish, chicken and rice. The small talk felt surreal. Dad asked about my work. Ruby complimented Mom's cooking. Quincy discussed the weather. We could have been any normal family having Sunday dinner except for the tension crackling under every word. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. So, Tatum, we wanted to talk about this misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? About the retirement fund, Mom said carefully. I think we all got our wires crossed about what that money was for. I don't think there's any confusion. I put money in, you took it out, you spent it on Robbie's wedding. Quincy set down his fork. Perhaps we could discuss a resolution that works for everyone. I'm listening. Your parents have agreed to pay you back over time, monthly installments until the full amount is repaid. I looked at Mom and Dad. With what money? We'll figure it out, Dad said quietly. Maybe I could do some tutoring or Mom could go back to work part-time. You're 60 and 57 years old. You think you can earn $127,000 with tutoring and part-time work? We have to try, Mom said. We made a mistake and we want to make it right. The mistake was spending money that wasn't yours. Making it right would have been asking permission first. Robbie leaned forward. Tatum, please, we're trying to fix this. Are you? Or are you trying to make it go away so Quincy doesn't cut ties with your family? Quincy's expression didn't change, but Ruby's face flushed. Both, Quincy said calmly. I believe in solving problems efficiently. This isn't a business problem, it's a family problem. All problems can be solved with the right approach. The doorbell rang. Mom looked confused. I'm not expecting anyone. Dad got up to answer it. We heard voices in the hallway, then Dad returned with a man in a suit carrying an official-looking envelope. Nora Garcia? The man asked. That's me, Mom said nervously. I have a certified delivery for you. Please sign here. Mom's hand shook as she signed the receipt. The man left, and she stared at the envelope like it might explode. What is it? Dad asked. Mom tore it open and pulled out several official documents. Her face went white as she read. It's from the IRS, she whispered. They're auditing us, and there's a penalty assessment for unreported gifts. She handed the papers to Dad, whose face crumpled as he read. How much? Robbie asked. Dad's voice was barely audible. $43,000 in penalties, plus interest, plus the cost of the audit. The room went completely silent except for the ticking of Mom's antique clock. Quincy reached for the papers. Dad handed them over without resistance. Quincy read through them methodically, his expression growing darker with each page. This is a disaster, he said finally. We can fight it, Ruby said desperately. Get a lawyer, appeal the decision. With what money? Quincy's voice was ice cold. They can't even pay back what they stole, let alone fight the federal government. We didn't steal anything, Mom said weakly. You took money that wasn't yours without permission and used it for your son's benefit. That's theft. He stood up. Ruby, we're leaving. Dad, wait! No, I will not have my family associated with this scandal. The wedding was paid for with stolen money, which means our entire relationship with this family is built on fraud. Robbie jumped up. Mr. Wallace, please, we can work this out. There's nothing to work out. You're married to my daughter under false pretenses. Your parents are criminals, and you're either complicit or incompetent. That's not fair, Ruby said, tears starting to fall. Fair? Quincy turned to me. You want to know what's fair? Fair would have been your parents asking before they spent money that wasn't theirs. Fair would have been your brother questioning where $100,000 came from. Fair would have been someone in this family having the integrity to do the right thing. He looked around the table. Instead, I find out my daughter's wedding was funded by theft, and when the victim tries to seek justice, you all gang up on her to make the problem disappear. We're trying to make it right, Dad said. No, you're trying to avoid consequences. There's a difference. Quincy walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to me. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. They made their choice when they took your money. Everything that happens now is on them. Ruby was sobbing now. Dad, please don't do this. I'm not doing anything, Ruby. They did this, all of it. He left. Ruby looked around the table at all of us, her face streaked with tears and mascara. I hope you're happy, she said to me. You got your revenge. This isn't revenge, I said quietly. This is consequences. She ran after her father, leaving the four of us sitting around the table with Mom's good china and the IRS papers scattered between the serving dishes. Well, I said, standing up, thanks for dinner. I walked out, leaving them sitting in the wreckage of their own making. My phone was buzzing with texts before I even reached my car, but I didn't look at them. I had nothing left to say. The phone calls stopped after 3 weeks. The texts dwindled to nothing. Even Robbie gave up trying to reach me. I was working late on a Thursday when Fiona knocked on my office door. Got a minute? She asked, holding 2 cups of coffee. Always. What's the update? Your parents' audit is moving forward. The IRS isn't budging on the penalties. She sat down across from my desk. But there's something else. I got a call from Ruby's divorce attorney. I looked up from my computer. She's divorcing Robbie? Papers were filed yesterday. She's citing fraud as grounds, specifically that the marriage was entered into under false financial pretenses. Wow, it gets better. Quincy cut all business ties with your brother. Robbie lost the job he was promised, and apparently Ruby's been staying with her parents since the dinner. The marriage lasted exactly 6 weeks. I leaned back in my chair. How do you feel about that? Honestly, I don't feel anything. Is that terrible? After what they put you through? No, it's not terrible. It's human. My office phone rang. The caller ID showed my parents' number. I stared at it for 4 rings, then answered. Hello, Dad. Tatum? His voice sounded older, tired. Can we talk? We're talking now. I mean in person, please. I looked at Fiona, who shrugged. Where? Neutral ground. That coffee shop on 5th Street? When? Now? I'm already here. I found him sitting in a corner booth, looking smaller than I remembered. His hair seemed grayer, his shoulders more stooped. There was a cup of coffee in front of him that looked untouched. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down. What do you want, Dad? To apologize. Really apologize, not the half-hearted attempts your mother and I made before. I didn't say anything. We were wrong, he continued, not just about taking the money, but about everything. The way we treated you, the way we favored Robbie, the way we took your sacrifices for granted. Okay. I know okay doesn't fix anything. I know sorry doesn't give you back 10 years of your life. No, it doesn't. He pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. This is what we can offer. It's not much, but it's a start. I opened it. A cashier's check for $8,000. We sold your mother's jewelry and my golf clubs, canceled our cable and phone plans, switched to the cheapest everything. We're going to pay you back, Tatum, every penny, even if it takes the rest of our lives. Dad, you can't earn $120,000 on a teacher's pension. Maybe not, but we can try, and we can make sure you know that we understand what we did to you. I stared at the check, $8,000. It was more than I'd expected, but a fraction of what they owed. Where's Mom? At home. She wanted to come, but she's not handling this well. The shame, the embarrassment, losing Robbie's marriage, it's eating her up. And Robbie? Moved back in with us. Lost his job, his wife, his future with the Wallace family. He's pretty broken up about it. I'm sure he is. Dad leaned forward. Tatum, I need you to know something. This isn't your fault. None of it. We made our choices and we're living with the consequences. You don't owe us forgiveness and you don't owe us a relationship. But I needed you to know that we finally understand what we lost. What did you lose? The best daughter any parent could ask for. Someone who loved us enough to sacrifice her own dreams for our security. Someone who deserved so much better than what we gave her. I folded the check and put it in my purse. I need to go. Will you consider staying in touch? Not for our sake, but because you're our daughter and we love you. I stood up. I'll think about it. That's more than we deserve. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Dad? Yes? Get some help for Mom and for Robbie. This kind of shame and guilt, it can destroy people if they don't deal with it properly. We will, thank you. I drove home through the city I lived in my whole life, past the office where I'd worked overtime for years, past the apartment complex where I'd chosen the cheapest unit to save money for people who didn't appreciate it. But for the first time in a decade, I wasn't driving toward an obligation or a sacrifice or someone else's emergency. I was just driving home to my own life. My phone buzzed with a text from Chelsea, my ex from college. Saw your LinkedIn update about the promotion. Congratulations. Want to grab dinner and catch up? I'd gotten the promotion 2 weeks ago, senior financial advisor, a position I'd been qualified for years, but never pursued because I was too focused on my family's needs. I texted back, I'd love that. How about Saturday? Her response came immediately. Perfect. I have so much to tell you. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car for a moment, looking at my small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Paid for with my own money, decorated with my own choices, filled with my own dreams instead of other people's expectations. My phone rang. Fiona's name appeared on the screen. How did it go? She asked. Better than expected. He apologized, really apologized. And and I think maybe someday I might be able to have a relationship with them again, but not now, not yet. That's fair. What about Robbie? What about him? Are you going to reach out? I thought about my little brother, the golden child who'd lost his golden future. Part of me felt sorry for him, but a bigger part of me remembered 28 years of being invisible while he shined. No, I said. He's an adult. He can figure out his own life. Good for you. I hung up and walked into my apartment. On my kitchen counter was a stack of travel brochures I'd picked up during lunch. Italy, Greece, Japan, all the places I dreamed of visiting but never could afford. Now I could afford them. Now I could afford a lot of things. I opened my laptop and started browsing flights to Rome. Karma hadn't asked for my forgiveness, just my patience. And now that it had done its work, I was finally free to live my own life. The best revenge, it turned out, wasn't destruction. It was freedom.
Pops is gone, huh? You're off to some facility starting tomorrow, my son declared coldly, as I sat there, still reeling from the grief of losing my husband. There wasn't even a hint of sorrow on his face for his father's death, just an unpleasant smirk. But don't worry, we'll make sure to properly inherit all of Dad's estate and the house. I was stunned. After not seeing him for so long, this was the first thing out of his mouth. His wife, standing beside him, seemed completely on board with inheriting everything too. They barely visited before, but now they show up just for this. There's no way I'd let them inherit anything. I'm Holly, married for 40 years. My husband and I had always talked about saving for retirement. We'll need about $1.3 million to retire comfortably, he'd say, and I'd agree. We'd worked hard and had some savings, enough that we wouldn't struggle immediately. But the worries never stopped. We do have a son, Kevin, but we haven't seen him in nearly 10 years. Who knows what he's doing now? We'd love to rely on him, but we can't depend on an absent son, especially with potential care needs in the future. Despite our worries, we managed to get by on our own, until one weekday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I thought it was a delivery, but when I checked the monitor, it was Kevin. He looked different from the last time I saw him, rougher, almost unrecognizable. Hey, it's Kevin, I exclaimed, surprised, as my husband looked just as shocked. Kevin? Really? I rushed to open the door, and there he stood with an unfamiliar, flashy woman by his side. Who is this woman? I wondered, my mind racing with questions. Kevin, unfazed, stepped in and called the woman over. What's going on? What's this all about? I asked, confused. Well, I'm getting married to her, Kevin announced casually. After being absent for so long, he dropped one surprise after another, leaving my husband and me speechless. The woman, who introduced herself as Sophie, spoke up. Nice to meet you, I'm Sophie. Just like that, it seemed they were ready to leave after a brief greeting. Wait, after so long, can't we talk a bit more? I asked, not wanting to hold them for long but hoping to chat more with my son and his fiancée. Please take good care of Kevin, I added, trying to be polite. But Sophie's response was cold and firm. I'm going to marry Kevin, but I have no intention of becoming part of your family. My husband and I were dumbfounded, unable to say anything as they left. That kind of response only amplified our worries about the future. 6 months have passed since Kevin and Sophie got married, and we haven't seen them once since that initial introduction. We're worried, but as long as our son and his wife are happy, that's all that should matter, or so we tried to tell ourselves. Then Kevin began contacting us occasionally. At first, it should have been a joy to hear from him, but the content of his calls was concerning. Hey, I'm a bit short on cash. Can you send me $1,000? I'll send you the account details later. It was always about money. He never showed any concern for us, just one-way demands, and it wasn't just once, it was several times a month. We knew this wasn't good. We wanted Kevin to stand on his own, but our concern for our only son made us give in. After discussing it, we complied with his requests. I wish he'd be smarter with his money, I'd say. The early days of marriage are expensive and we hardly did anything for him when he was young. This is partly our responsibility, my husband would add. For a while, we continued to provide funds to Kevin, but recently he started calling almost daily asking for more money. We realized that if this continued, we wouldn't be able to sustain our own lives. One day, I decided it was time to tell Kevin we couldn't provide any more assistance. When he called, I said, Kevin, I have something to discuss about money. What? You're calling to say you'll transfer money? He asked, sounding disinterested. No, that's not it. We can't send any more money. We have our own lives to live. Fine, whatever, he responded, surprisingly calm. I thought we had finally reached an understanding, but my relief was short-lived. Barely an hour after we ended the call, Kevin stormed into our house, furious. My life is a mess because of you too. It's your fault I dropped out of middle school. It's the parents' responsibility, right? If you can't give me money, then whatever happens is on you. Kevin stood before us, the very image of a delinquent. It's true that my husband and I were too busy with work when he was young and didn't spend enough time with him. Now, seeing him like this, I feared what might happen if we didn't help him. His angry gaze left me with little choice but to comply. All right, how much do you need? I asked hesitantly. That's up to you, Kevin replied, his tone cold. It pained me to realize just how much our son resented us. For the time being, I handed him the $100 I had in my wallet. $100? You're joking, right? He scoffed. No, this is really all I can do, I said, showing him my bank statement. It was the account we used for living expenses, not the one for savings, so it didn't have much in it. Moreover, it was just before my pension was due, so there was hardly anything left. Is that so? Kevin muttered as he pocketed the $100 and left without another word. After that incident, perhaps realizing he couldn't expect any more money from us, the calls from Kevin demanding money stopped. I thought we could finally live a peaceful retirement, until my husband was diagnosed with colorectal cancer shortly afterward. The doctor said that even with treatment, recovery wasn't expected, and only hospice care could be provided. I wanted him to live as long as possible, but he didn't feel the same. I've had enough, he said, his voice weary. If there's no hope of recovery, don't waste money. Think of your future and save what we have. Persuaded by my husband's wishes, I reluctantly agreed. I decided to let him spend his final days as he wished. A month later, he passed away peacefully. You did well. This is for the best, I reassured myself, though losing my beloved husband left me in deep sorrow. The only comfort I had was knowing he spent his last moments without pain. Preparations for the funeral began immediately, but my role was minimal, just contacting people from a list my husband had prepared before his passing. The list included old friends, colleagues, and our son, Kevin. When I informed Kevin of his father's death, his response was indifferent. How cold-hearted, I thought, letting out a sigh. On the day of the funeral, the service went smoothly and many came to offer their condolences, but there was no sign of my son or his wife. I hadn't expected them to show up. As I was greeting mourners, I saw Kevin and Sophie arrive, just casually in what looked like loungewear. Unbelievable. I tried to ignore them, but they approached me. So, the old man finally kicked the bucket, huh? You should just go into a care home starting tomorrow, were the first words out of Kevin's mouth. My anger surged at his smirking face and the callous suggestion. Just as I was about to retort, Sophie chimed in. Don't worry, we'll properly inherit the estate and the house. What on earth were they thinking? There's no inheritance for you to receive, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. They had barely been in our lives, yet here they were, acting as if they had a right to everything. I wanted to lash out, but I couldn't bring myself to do it at my husband's funeral. We'll talk later. For now, just offer your incense, I said quietly, trying to suppress the trembling in my voice. Then, I heard a familiar voice. Same as always, said Mr. Smith, an old friend of my husband's and as it turned out, a lawyer. He might know something about this inheritance issue. When I briefly explained the situation to him, he assured me he would help me disinherit Kevin. After the ceremony ended and the mourners had left, only Mr. Smith, my son, his wife, and I remained at the funeral parlor. Did Dad leave a $2 million inheritance? Give it to us, quickly, Kevin demanded, smirking as usual while Sophie looked on expectantly. They must have thought they were entitled to everything, but I had no intention of giving them a cent. I'll make this clear, you won't be getting any inheritance, I stated firmly. Kevin, stunned by my words, reacted with anger. What? You've got to be joking. That's impossible, you can't do that. You think it's not allowed, I replied calmly. Why don't we confirm with Mr. Smith here? I've already left the inheritance matters in his hands, so it's out of mine. Kevin scoffed dismissively. What are you even saying? I don't care about some irrelevant old man. His vulgar language made me feel a deep shame, regretting that I had raised a son who would argue about inheritance at his father's funeral. Disgusted by his attitude, I turned to Mr. Smith and asked, please explain the situation. Of course, Mr. Smith began. Kevin, do you remember me? I don't know you. Who the hell are you? Kevin snapped, his tone aggressive. Mr. Smith remained calm and undisturbed. That's a shame. We used to play together when you were little. Kevin, uninterested in past memories, demanded, so what? You're here to talk about Dad's estate, right? I'm the one who'll inherit it. When Kevin returned to the topic of inheritance, Mr. Smith's expression sharpened. Kevin, you have no right to inherit. What? What nonsense are you spouting? Kevin shot back. Remember your delinquent behavior as a teenager that involved the police, Mr. Smith continued. And as an adult, you accumulated significant debt without your mother's knowledge, which your father had to repay. I know everything. I had just learned these details from Mr. Smith, aware of Kevin's past misdeeds, but completely blindsided by the massive debt he had created, which my husband had quietly covered. So what? Kevin spat. It's a parent's duty to take care of their child. Besides, there's no doubt I'm his son, so naturally, I have a right to the inheritance. Kevin moved toward Mr. Smith in a rage, with Sophie equally furious by his side. It's impossible that Kevin doesn't have any inheritance rights. Everyone knows a person's own child would have rights. Are you a real lawyer, or is that just a lie? She demanded. Their loud arguments drew the attention of the funeral parlor's security guards, who rushed over in a panic. Is there a problem here? One of the guards asked, trying to calm them down as he approached me for details. I felt embarrassed to have others involved in this family conflict. I'm sorry, it's just a family dispute. I apologized sincerely to the guard. We truly didn't mean to cause any trouble. While I bowed my head in apology, Kevin and Sophie continued to struggle. Let go. What do you think you're doing? Ouch, that hurts. Stop it, old man, they shouted, their disrespectful behavior finally pushing me to the brink. Enough, I snapped. Your attire and behavior are completely inappropriate for a funeral. You're causing a scene and disturbing everyone around you. Knock it off. I was aware my voice was getting louder, and the couple, who hadn't expected me to get this angry, suddenly quieted down. Mr. Smith leaned in and whispered to me, don't worry, there's no way Kevin will inherit. Your father prepared a contingency plan. A contingency plan, I repeated, unsure of what he meant. But Mr. Smith continued, it's time to confront Kevin with the hardship he's caused you. He patted my back reassuringly. I couldn't indulge my son's selfishness any longer and approached them calmly. Enough already, I said firmly. That's my line, Kevin retorted. All this could end if you just agree to let me inherit. I've told you countless times, it's impossible for you to inherit, I replied, moving closer with each step. Kevin's face turned pale as he noticed my approach. You come to your father's funeral with a disrespectful attitude after causing trouble for others your entire life. You truly have no respect for your parents, I said coldly, leering at him. No, but that's because of you too. You were never home when I was a kid, Kevin protested, always quick to make excuses when cornered. Yes, we weren't home, and I regret that, I admitted. But many kids grow up in similar situations and don't spend their lives blaming their parents. It's pathetic to rely on your parents even as an adult. Kevin trembled silently, his head bowed. Whether from anger or sorrow, I couldn't tell, but I knew he was listening. It was time to resolve this once and for all. Mr. Smith, please use the last resort you mentioned earlier. I had no idea what this last resort entailed, but it seemed like the only way to break through the current situation. In response, Mr. Smith handed me an envelope. Inside was a document titled Final Judgment Certificate of Inheritance. "What's this?" I asked, perplexed by the contents. I stared at the document in my hands, confused. "What does this mean?" I asked, both Kevin and Sophie looking on with curiosity. Kevin, cornered and defiant, shifted uneasily. Mr. Smith began to explain quietly, "During his lifetime, your father filed a court petition stating that he did not want Kevin to inherit any of his estate. This document proves that his petition was accepted." Kevin and Sophie were clearly shaken by this revelation, and I was struggling to grasp the situation. "When did this happen?" I asked, bewildered. "Your father asked me to keep it a secret from you," Mr. Smith continued. "Now that he has passed away, I believed it was the right time to present this document to you." "What does this mean?" Kevin demanded, his voice tinged with frustration. "Are you saying my father decided to cut me out of the inheritance? Why would he do that? Can this just be ignored?" Mr. Smith explained further, "Normally, a husband's estate would be inherited by his spouse and children. However, under certain circumstances, one can apply to disinherit a specific person. This is known as disinheritance." "So you're telling me my father took this step to exclude me?" Kevin's anger was palpable. "Is there any way this can be ignored?" I had never heard of such a measure before. The reality that my husband had gone to great lengths to ensure Kevin wouldn't inherit was sinking in. Mr. Smith added, "Unfortunately, it cannot be ignored. It has been legally recognized by the court and the procedure is legally valid. Additionally, considering the significant debt Kevin has caused your father over the years, it's understandable why he would want to avoid leaving an inheritance." I had not been aware of the extent of Kevin's debt. "How much debt did my son leave for my husband to cover?" "It was $40,000, Mr. Smith replied. "Your husband was prepared to handle it himself rather than have Kevin demand money from him every month. There was an agreement that Kevin would repay it, but he broke that promise, which left your husband very angry." I was shocked by this revelation and turned to Kevin, who remained silent. His silence spoke volumes. "If you're going to be silent, then fine. Just leave," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and despair. "I never want to see either of you again," I said firmly. "You understand that you won't be inheriting anything." Kevin's defiant attitude persisted. "But surely there's something." My patience snapped. "Leave, you ungrateful son. Our ties are severed. Never come to see me again." Startled by my outburst, Kevin and Sophie quickly exited the room. I saw Kevin stumble in his haste and fall to the floor. "Mr. Smith, thank you. I don't know what I would have done without your help," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "It was your husband's last wish," Mr. Smith replied. "Now you can find peace knowing his wishes were honored." Thanks to Mr. Smith's support, I was able to protect my late husband's inheritance. Without his assistance, I might have been forced into a difficult situation, vulnerable to Kevin and Sophie's demands. Kevin had never changed, and I no longer considered him my son. He and his wife could fend for themselves. I planned to ensure they received nothing from me. With these thoughts, I left the funeral. A week later, while sorting through my husband's belongings, the phone rang. "Hello, is this Miss Holly?" The voice on the other end was from the police. "Yes, it is. How can I help you?" "We have a son named Kevin, correct? We found 2 children living in a flat under his name, and they've been taken into protective custody." I was stunned. "What's the situation? Are these children my sons?" The officer continued, "We're also searching for Kevin but haven't located him yet. Could you please come to the station?" "I'll be right there," I replied, feeling a mix of dread and curiosity. Upon arriving at the station, I immediately recognized the children. They were about 2 years old and bore a striking resemblance to Kevin when he was young. No birth certificates had been filed, likely due to financial troubles. The landlord had reported them after discovering debt collection letters scattered near the children. They had probably been abandoned during a desperate escape. It was heartbreaking to see such young children in this situation. "Would you consider placing them in a care facility?" the officer asked. "No, I'll take them in," I responded immediately. Since then, I've faced the challenges of childcare, but my days have been fulfilling with the children. Years have passed since I took them in, and there's been no word from Kevin and his wife. I tell the children that their father might be gone or somewhere else, but they won't see him again. The abandonment must have left a deep wound in their hearts, but I am committed to supporting and caring for them as they grow. Ken smiled as he recalled, "Your parents were always a handful." My mother-in-law nodded in agreement, adding with a faint smile, "Now that they're gone, I can say it. Growing up under such parents, it's no wonder you struggled with independence." She looked at me pointedly, her words cutting deep. "If I had raised you, Maya, you would have turned out respectable like Ken," she continued, her tone dripping with condescension. It had only been a week since my parents' tragic car accident, and I was too mentally and physically drained to argue. My parents were respectable people, and I wanted to defend them. I wanted to retort, "If your mother had raised me, I might have ended up with a despicable personality like your son." But the words wouldn't come. My body felt too heavy to move, my mind too exhausted to fight back. I was ashamed of my weakness, unable to protect my parents' honor even as they were insulted. Just as I was sinking into despair, Ella appeared, her voice sharp with anger. "You have no right to act superior," she snapped. "I know the truth." The shocking revelations she shared reignited a fire in my heart. I wouldn't allow any more insults to my parents. From that moment, my daughter and I began to fight back. I'm Maya, a 38-year-old homemaker. I married Ken because I got pregnant, and it's been 16 years since then. I live with our energetic daughter, Ella. I had to drop out of university due to health issues when I got pregnant, a decision I sometimes regretted. But seeing Ella healthy and thriving, I knew I made the right choice. I've poured all my love into her, and she respects me in return. She's a talented young woman, so much so that she earned a computer qualification in middle school and was even featured in the newspaper. I may not be tech savvy, but I admire her dedication and hard work. She's bright, friendly, and has many friends. I'm truly proud of the wonderful person she's become. However, my relationship with Ken hasn't been as smooth. In the early days of our marriage, his words, "Your support is what keeps me going," captivated me. I dreamed of a bright future together. But the reality was far from that. During my pregnancy, I suffered from severe morning sickness and back pain, spending most of my time in bed. Even then, I can't forget his harsh words. "Aren't you even going to prepare dinner? Don't slack off on your housework," he scolded, showing no empathy for my condition. Even when I'm not feeling well, I work hard at the office every day. "I'm not slacking off like you," he'd say, making me anxious about our future. When Ella was born, Ken didn't even show up at the hospital, citing work as an excuse. I didn't see him until we were discharged. That was when my affection for him began to wane. Yet I didn't choose divorce, mainly for Ella's sake. I felt incapable of raising her alone, especially without the means to send her to a good private school. So I endured, even when Ken made irrational demands like, "I can't eat this awful food. Remake it immediately." I silently complied, striving to be the ideal wife. As I continued to obey without complaint, Ken grew more arrogant. By the time 10 years had passed, he no longer even called me by my name. It wasn't just him. My mother-in-law also tormented me. She'd visit when Ken wasn't around and harass me with cruel words. "Women with low education and no career like you aren't suitable for Ken. You probably only got married because you were young. Now that you're getting older, you'd better make an effort not to be abandoned." And all I could do was apologize. "I'll do my best," was always my response. But no matter how often I said it, it never seemed to make a difference. My mother-in-law would inspect the house with a critical eye, eventually pointing out some minuscule spot on the bookshelf. "Look, you haven't cleaned properly," she'd say. "If you're a housewife, it's only natural that there shouldn't be a speck of dust left." I wonder if low education also means low skills in housework. No matter how hard I worked, she always found something to criticize. There was only one time I couldn't hold back. I broke under the weight of my husband and mother-in-law's constant harsh words. "Ken, weren't you much kinder before we got married? Why did you become so cold?" Even after 10 years of marriage, I still couldn't understand why he had changed. For a decade, I'd been searching for answers, but I couldn't find any specific reason. If my husband's coldness was directed solely at me, I might have been able to endure it. But thinking about our daughter, I decided to confront him. "I understand work is tough, but I want you to make a little more time for Ella." His response, when he returned, was cruel. "Why should I bother with my daughter's mood? I'm already busy running the company I founded, unlike you, who have nothing to do all day." After shouting this, he quickly retreated to his room. If Ella had been his biological daughter, maybe he would have listened. That faint hope was shattered in an instant. Feeling at my limit, I decided to confide in my parents about everything that had happened. Their words were a relief I hadn't realized I needed. Why didn't you talk to us sooner? If it's about your livelihood, we'll support you. Divorce him quickly. For someone who had tried to overcome everything on my own, their support was incredibly reassuring. However, it didn't lead to a divorce. My husband, who had always been intimidating, suddenly showed an apologetic attitude in front of my parents. It was my fault. I deeply apologize, he repeated, tears streaming down his face. Perhaps he felt something in that moment, and my fundamentally kind parents were moved by his apparent remorse. In the end, we decided not to divorce. But that decision didn't solve the problem. As soon as we returned home, my husband's demeanor changed. He berated me with an angry voice. This isn't a joke. What's the matter with humiliating me like that? It's shameful to rely on your parents when you're an adult. If we divorce, our reputation in society will plummet. Can't you even understand such basic things? His shouting filled the room, and Ella watched us, her face expressionless. My days filled with anguish showed no signs of ending. 8 years later, my parents passed away in a car accident. The cause of the accident was mistakenly pressing the accelerator instead of the brake. I couldn't believe it had come to this. Devastated by the obituary, I barely had time to process my grief before I had to take on the responsibility of arranging my parents' funeral. As their only child, the weight of this duty fell entirely on me. My husband made it clear he had no intention of helping. This is your parents' funeral, so I won't help at all. You deal with everything on your own, he declared before heading off to work as usual. Despite his indifference, on the day of the funeral, he showed up in new clothes with a mournful expression, keeping his head down. I wasn't even allowed to buy new clothes, but it was obvious why he attended. He cared about appearances. His true motives became even clearer a week later, on a Sunday. My mother-in-law and husband came to the house, both wearing smug smiles, and delivered a statement that left me reeling. We always had trouble dealing with your parents, Ken said with a smile. But they're finally gone, he added, as my mother-in-law nodded in agreement. If you're raised by parents like that, you'll end up as someone who can't be independent, like Maya. If I had raised her, she would have become a fine person like Ken, she added. I was utterly exhausted, both from the shock of losing my parents and the strain of my marriage. These two delivered words that felt like a final blow. What had I ever done to deserve this? I wanted to scream at them, to tell them not to mess around, but I was too worn out, too shattered to respond. My mind and body were completely drained. All I could do was silently apologize to my parents, feeling like a failure as their daughter for not defending them against such insults. Just as I was sinking into despair, my daughter suddenly appeared. Her expression was defiant as she addressed my husband and mother-in-law. Who do you think you are? I know everything, she said, her words eliciting an irritated look from my husband. I'm not going to entertain nonsense. You should be studying your room or something, he snapped. Yeah, that's right. Ella needs to study so she doesn't turn out like her mom, my mother-in-law chimed in. But Ella remained silent in the face of their condescension, and then she dropped a bombshell. You think I don't know? I saw you tampering with Grandpa's car. I gasped in astonishment. Could it be true? Had they really tampered with the car? Was the accident deliberate? If that was the case, it was beyond outrageous. It was monstrous. I instinctively looked at the two of them, and they stared at Ella with pale faces. Ella, what are you saying? That your father tampered with the car? Don't talk nonsense, my husband yelled, his face drained of color, anger barely masking his fear. My mother-in-law's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. Ella, unfazed by her father's shouting, met his anger head-on, raising her voice to match his. Nonsense. Then why don't you confirm it with your own eyes? With that, she pulled out her smartphone and played a saved video. The video began with a shot of my dad's car before it was wrecked, clearly showing it in their garage. After a few seconds, voices could be heard off-screen. All right, good thing we left the keys unlocked, said my husband's voice. How did you unlock the garage? Asked my mother-in-law. I went to apologize to my in-laws before, remember? I made a copy of the house key then, thinking I'd get it back to them someday. I knew Maya had the key, so I borrowed it while she was sleeping. Even though he was always so concerned about appearances, my husband had secretly copied a master key to my parents' house. My mother-in-law didn't condemn his wrongdoing. Instead, she praised him. Just like my son, how clever. But really, why is your wife so clueless? It's beyond comprehension, she said. I couldn't believe such despicable people were connected to me. It was enough to make my vision blur with anger. As I wondered how my daughter had managed to film such footage, the video continued, capturing their vile conversation. To be honest, I wanted to marry a more attractive woman, my husband admitted on the recording. But I was afraid of the trouble from rumors after dumping her, so I ended up getting married. My mother-in-law chuckled and added, "It might be true that even conceiving a child was part of her scheme with you. What a hopeless child she is." They hurled insults at me before turning on a flashlight and beginning to tamper with the car. After about 30 minutes, my husband stood up, wiping sweat from his brow and uttering decisive words. "All right, the setup is complete. I messed with the brakes, so there's bound to be an accident somewhere. My anger won't subside until someone gets seriously hurt." My mother-in-law agreed with a sinister satisfaction, saying, "Yes, make my son bow like that. Those people deserve to suffer." The video ended as they left the garage, acting as if nothing had happened. Ella looked at her father, her face filled with a sense of superiority. "How about it? Can you still call this a lie?" she asked, leaving my husband speechless. "Debbie, why would there be such a video?" he stammered, his confidence shattered. "I filmed it myself," Ella stated, her voice steady. "What he did to Grandpa's car and how he mocked Mom is unforgivable. He's truly the worst man, isn't he?" She sighed heavily, her frustration evident, then addressed them slowly. "Sharing the same blood as you is nothing but disgraceful. If only I had noticed that camera's existence a little sooner, this wouldn't have happened. Realizing it only after the funeral proves that surveillance cameras are useless." Ella's eyes narrowed as she looked at them coldly. "People like you should be arrested." The moment they heard the word arrested, their faces changed. "Arrested? Becoming a criminal? That's absurd. Hand over that phone," my husband shouted, lunging at our daughter. Instinctively, I stepped in and skillfully dodged him, knocking him to the floor. "Actually, our family runs self-defense classes. I used to attend before getting married, so I can easily subdue you when you attack without thinking." "You can't do that. That's violence. I'll sue you," my husband yelled. But the tension that had built up in me for years snapped, and I finally let my emotions take over. "Violence? Then what do you call what you just tried to do to Ella? I can't believe you tried to lay a hand on your own daughter." Perhaps surprised by my unexpected retaliation, he stumbled over his response. "And no, that's what you're doing is clearly voyeurism," he stammered, trying to regain control of the situation. Ella cut him off sharply. "I had Grandpa's permission. I wanted to test the new security camera system I built." He scoffed. There's no way Ella could build a system like that. But Ella, with abilities that seemed unlikely to have come from me, had received awards in programming. She was considered a prodigy, so much so that news crews had come to her school to interview her. "You didn't even know about the awards, did you?" she retorted, her voice dripping with contempt. "I earned awards for programming, yet I've had to endure being a failure of a parent," Ella said, her voice laced with contempt as she delivered the final blow. "Now you're going to get arrested, and you'll be a failure as a member of society too." She fixed her father with a cold gaze. "You call yourself elite, but you don't even know basic things that high schoolers do. Maybe your definition of elite is different, but to me it's just vanity." At last, my mother-in-law, who had been silent until now, finally raised her voice. "That's enough. I can't believe you'd refer to your own father like that. Maybe it's because you, Maya, are so violent that this child grew up to be violent too." I was speechless, utterly astonished. Had she already forgotten what happened earlier when her son tried to attack our daughter? Ella shot back, "Criminals should stay quiet. Breaking my smartphone is pointless. The data is in the cloud, so you can't erase it anyway." Impressed by my daughter's foresight, I watched as she continued. "Why suddenly talk about clouds?" she mocked. "I'm not talking about the sky. I'm talking about the internet. Elite people like you should understand, right? Especially after all the boasting you did to Mom." But both my husband and his mother remained silent, clearly unfamiliar with cloud computing. "Calling yourselves elite is just plain vanity," Ella continued. "What a pitiful family. Don't be ridiculous. Who do you think has been feeding you all this time? With whose money?" my husband retorted angrily. "It's not that she didn't work, but that she couldn't," Ella replied coolly. "In fact, my husband had pressured me into being the housewife, insisting that a dual income would ruin his rich man image. He gradually stripped away what little independence I had. But today, those days end." Seeing my daughter bravely stand up, I realized I needed to do the same. Ella is right. I've stayed in this marriage for our daughter's sake, but being with someone like you is detrimental to her, I said firmly. Are you really asking for a divorce? How will a woman who's never worked survive without me? My husband shouted, his contemptuous attitude exposing how hollow his pride really was. I decided to shatter that inflated ego. Do you really think you can live without me? Who do you think irons your suits every day, cleans this comfortable house, prepares your favorite meals? I've done all that. Without me, do you think you can handle it all by yourself? Of course I can, he responded, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. Your voice seems shaky. Are you really confident? I pressed. Yeah, well, anyway, there's prison life waiting for you from now on, so there's no need to worry about that, Ella said with a smile. I almost laughed. That's a relief. Your life as an elite is over, and from now on, you won't have to worry about society's gaze. As he continued to speak, it seemed he reached a breaking point and suddenly screamed, breaking free from my grasp. This is no joke. There's no way I'm going to prison. If I just destroy the cameras, the evidence disappears, he yelled, rushing off and leaving his mother behind. But he tripped over my shoes and fell, flailing like a frog in the doorway. Seeing him in such a state, Ella calmly called the police. In the end, both my husband and his mother were taken away by the authorities. Subsequently, videos taken by my daughter and other evidence were discovered, leading to their arrest. Anger welled up within me as I thought about the truth behind my parents' deaths. The trial is still ongoing, but I hope they receive appropriate punishment. Furthermore, my husband's company went bankrupt immediately following his arrest, with lawsuits regarding unpaid wages piling up. It seems he was unpopular among his employees, often speaking condescendingly without offering much helpful advice. Their belief in their own superiority was just a misconception. Since then, my daughter and I have been living a peaceful life. Although there were concerns about finances, my parents left us an inheritance. The will stipulated that the inheritance was solely for my daughter and me, granting my husband no rights. I was surprised by the existence of the will, but apparently it was prepared long ago, foreseeing events such as my contemplation of divorce or their passing. I hold deep respect for my parents. I started attending a vocational school for welfare-related studies, using the inheritance. I believe that acquiring specialized qualifications will pave the way for me to become a full-fledged employee despite my lack of prior work experience. My daughter is passionate about app development and expresses a desire to become a programmer in the future. While life with just the two of us can be challenging, it's also filled with happiness. I cherish the precious life I share with my daughter and hope to continue doing so in the future. 7 people should be fine. The child can sit separately. My mother-in-law Jane's words rang out clearly and without hesitation. Her constant torment had reached its peak, but today was the day I planned to confront it all. At this family gathering, I intended to reveal a hidden truth that had been simmering beneath the surface. I'm Nancy, a 28-year-old chef. After graduating from culinary school, I began working at a renowned Western-style restaurant where I met my husband, Mike. He was a regular customer at the restaurant, hailing from a family with a long-standing legacy in the electronics industry. Following his father's passing last year, Mike took over the family business. My own family is fairly ordinary, except for one notable detail. My parents and even my older brother are all chefs. Growing up, every meal at home was a special event, fueling my passion for cooking. I'm proud to say I graduated at the top of my class thanks to my family's support and background. Generally, I'm a calm person, but I take great pride in my culinary skills. However, everything changed after marriage. When Mike and I decided to marry, I knew I would be moving into this family home. While I was prepared for the transition, I didn't anticipate it happening so quickly. In retrospect, I wish we had discussed it more thoroughly. Initially, Jane welcomed me with unexpected warmth. She was incredibly attentive, bringing treats and offering to handle household chores. Naturally, her home-cooked meals became a staple at our dining table. But there was a catch. Her cooking was vastly different from what I was used to. Jane, coming from the northern part of the country, preferred much stronger flavors. Her seasoning was so intense that it was hard to distinguish the ingredients in her dishes. A bite often felt like wading through a sea of salt. Jane would cheerfully say, You need it this strong to make the rice more appetizing, and would encourage me to have seconds. Internally, I found it overwhelming, though Mike, sitting next to me, seemed to think the food was just a bit bland. I was stunned when Jane mentioned that she had toned down the flavors for my benefit. Each day, my sense of taste seemed to dull, which affected my confidence in seasoning dishes at work. Thankfully, the head chef, who always inspects my dishes, hadn't raised any concerns, but I felt compelled to act. I began waking up earlier to prepare breakfast to my taste, which helped restore some of my confidence in seasoning. However, Jane noticed my efforts and started growing distant. Her behavior changed subtly at first, ignoring my greetings more frequently and making sharp comments about my cooking. "Isn't the dinner tonight a bit bland?" she asked. I reassured her. I believe I seasoned it properly. Despite my attempts to adapt, it seemed Jane's disapproval was only growing. I took a bite and knew instantly that it wasn't bland. The seasoning felt lacking, almost tasteless. "Doesn't it bother you?" Jane asked, her voice laced with disapproval. "I think for health reasons, it's better not to make it too rich. Enjoying delicious food is important, but preparing meals at home isn't your job. You should adjust to our preferences." No matter what I said, Jane always had a counterargument. Then, with a dismissive gesture, she drenched the dish I had put so much effort into with soy sauce. I was confused and hurt. I was trying to be considerate of the family's health with lighter seasoning, yet this was the result. I felt lost, and my mind drifted back to an earlier event, my niece Jessica's 5th birthday party, held at my sister-in-law Kathy's home. Kathy has 2 older sisters who are incredibly warm and supportive. From the start, they assured me they'd be there for me if I ever needed anything. Their husbands were equally kind and approachable. At the party, I helped with the cooking as Jane had asked. The table was filled with a variety of dishes, clearly distinguished by their origins. My dishes were Western style, while Jane's were traditional Japanese, leading to a stark contrast in ambience and seasoning. The party began on a high note. Jessica, who adores the omures from NY's restaurant, was thrilled to have it at home. Kathy, with a cheerful smile, said, "I often make that omures myself." Jessica, brimming with enthusiasm, declared, "I love omures. NY's is the best." Her excitement brightened the mood instantly. However, Jane seemed slightly out of place. She pushed her own dish, saying, "Come on, try this. It's Grandma's special stew." Jessica hesitated, noting, "It's a bit too salty for me." After tasting the stew, Kathy's husband grimaced and asked, "Could you tone down the salt next time? Can I have some more water, please?" The atmosphere grew awkward as Kathy's comment hung in the air. "Mom, don't you think your dish is a bit too rich today? Maybe you could cook with Nancy and pick up some seasoning tips from her," Kathy said with a laugh. Though she might have been joking, Jane's face flushed with anger. Without a word, she snapped and retreated from the room. I felt overwhelmed and speechless. Despite my best efforts to help with the cooking, it seemed like I had inadvertently made things worse. The tension lingered, and eventually, everyone decided to leave early. It was disheartening to have my heartfelt efforts criticized. That night, I apologized to Jane, but her response was sharp. "You're just living here, and yet you're so presumptuous." I was hurt, but I tried to understand her feelings and be patient. However, the next day, it became clear that her attitude towards me had shifted. She began adding excessive seasoning to the breakfast I prepared, often grimacing as she did. Sometimes, she would throw the food away without even tasting it. When I sought support from Mike, he dismissed my concerns with comments like, "Aren't you being a bit stubborn?" or "You're probably just overreacting." His responses made me feel distant, as if the issue was not his concern. Despite being newlyweds, he started coming home late and avoided family events. The growing distance between us made me question if I could continue living like this. I'd even considered divorce, but the thought of explaining the situation to our parents and relatives was daunting. Things took a turn for the worse when Jane fell down the stairs and injured her foot. Kathy promptly offered to help with daily chores, but Jane insisted that I take over. She began assigning me a multitude of errands and even called me during work hours. The constant early departures from work led to concerned glances and complaints from my colleagues, ultimately forcing me to resign. When Jane learned of my resignation, she remarked with a sense of superiority, "It's a pity, considering how much you love that job." The days that followed were incredibly tough. I was on call for Jane day and night, leaving me with little time for myself. Even when I asked Mike for help, he consistently made implausible excuses, claiming he was too busy or staying overnight at the company. I felt I could no longer stay in this house, but I didn't want to leave without making a statement. One clear morning, as the three of us sat at the table, I mustered the courage to say, "I'm considering a divorce." Mike and Jane were stunned. "Why all of a sudden?" Mike asked, wide-eyed. "We've just gotten married. Did I do something wrong? Aren't you misunderstanding something?" Jane, with a disgruntled expression, added, "Asking for a divorce without any reason is childish." Their reactions made me feel belittled, but my resolve was unshakable. "I'm not misunderstanding anything," I replied firmly. "Mike is constantly away, and Jane seems to take pleasure in tormenting me. Why would I want to stay in such an environment? I'm going to get a divorce. My decision is final." My declaration took them by surprise. "I'm sorry, I'll come home earlier from now on," Mike said, his face showing some displeasure. "If you want, you can go back to your parents' home for a while. But considering my mother's leg, could you stay here a bit longer?" Mike's suggestion carried an undertone of frustration. I acknowledged his offer but replied simply, "Understood." At that moment, I noticed the smirks on their faces, like mother, like son. For a short period, Jane's antagonistic behavior diminished and Mike genuinely tried to come home earlier. However, this brief period of peace didn't last long. Mike's overtime work increased and Jane's ill temper resurfaced. Despite her supposedly injured foot, she frequently ventured out. As I pondered their behavior, I was on the verge of uncovering an unbelievable truth. A few days later, my cell phone rang continuously with calls from Jane and Mike. Mike's voice was filled with anger. "Where are you? How could you just leave my mother alone like that? You were the one who said I could go back to my parents' home," I coldly retorted, "but my mother's foot still isn't healed." Mike continued with seemingly trivial excuses, and in the background, I could hear Jane's irritated voice. "From now on, let's discuss matters through a lawyer," I said with a heavy sigh before hanging up. Back at my parents' house, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension as I began to prepare for the next steps. I spent my days feeling rejuvenated at my parents' home. The warmth and familiarity there helped heal my emotional wounds. The time I spent with them felt truly fulfilling, especially when my mother prepared my favorite dishes. Her love was palpable, and as I helped with the cooking, I felt the deep bond of family once more. When my mother praised the dish I made, saying it was delicious, tears welled up in my eyes. In the midst of this comforting routine, my phone rang unexpectedly. To my surprise, it was Jane. She apologized for everything she had done in the past and invited me to her birthday party, which was to be held at a renowned upscale restaurant in town. Despite my mixed feelings, I saw it as a chance to bridge gaps and decided to attend. Jane seemed satisfied as she informed me of the party details, including the time. On the day of the event, Mike and Jane were already waiting outside the restaurant. When they spotted me, both greeted me with smug smiles. The attendees were the same as the previous party. My two sisters-in-law, Kathy and Meg, their husbands, my niece Jessica, Mike, and Jane, 8 people in total. Before everyone arrived, Mike and Jane instructed me not to mention our divorce to the family until after dinner. When Kathy, Meg, and their families showed up, Kathy greeted me warmly. "Nancy, it's been a while. You seem to have lost a bit of weight. Are you doing okay?" Once everyone was gathered, we approached the restaurant. A staff member greeted us and said, "Your reservation is for 7 people under the name of Jane, correct?" I was sure we had 8, but Jane interjected, "Yes, 7 is correct. Nancy can sit at a different table." As I looked around, I saw the surprised expressions on the faces of my sisters-in-law and their husbands, while Mike and Jane wore satisfied smirks. It became clear to me that this was their plan. How childish could they be? "Nancy, you've prepared a special surprise, haven't you?" Jane taunted with a smirk. Who makes themselves the center of attention with a surprise at their own birthday party? Only someone like Jane, I thought. Well, if that's how she wants it. I quickly came up with a delightful surprise. "Nancy, do you really have something planned? Even if you don't feel too much pressure," Kathy said with concern. I whispered back, "Yes, I do have something in mind, but Jane's behavior is making it difficult." Excusing myself, I asked the staff if any seats were available. They kindly offered me a spot that was out of Jane and Mike's line of sight. As the group enjoyed their meal, a special children's menu was served for Jessica, who excitedly declared, "This tastes just like the owner from Ometers." Kathy praised the dishes and Jane boasted, "Ever since this restaurant got a new chef, The flavors have improved significantly. The meat dish coming out next is supposed to be outstanding. Mike nodded in agreement, and soon the much-anticipated meat dish began to be served to Kathy, Meg, and their families. For some reason, Jane and Mike's table was overlooked. Jane, clearly agitated, called out to a waiter with a raised voice, "Please wait a moment, we will serve it shortly." The waiter replied, "I'll watch," with some amusement before heading to the kitchen to prepare. A few minutes later, I emerged wearing a chef's apron and announced, "Sorry for the wait." Jane and Mike stared at me in disbelief. "Could it be that you made the dish?" Kathy asked, her voice filled with surprise and delight. Jane and Mike were left speechless as I cheerfully placed the dishes in front of them. I even gave them a playful wink and said, "Enjoy." Feeling mischievous, I presented Jane with a special dish drenched in soy sauce and gleaming darkly on the plate. For the final touch, I poured even more soy sauce over it, leaving Jane stunned into silence. I then set a unique dish in front of Mike, saying, "I hope this energizes you like a battery." I placed several actual batteries on Mike's plate with a smirk. My niece burst into laughter at the sight, while Kathy, Meg, and their husbands looked on with a mix of shock and concern. "What kind of service is this? Where's the manager?" Mike demanded. "You won't get away with this." Just then, the restaurant's manager approached, maintaining a calm demeanor. "Is there an issue here?" he asked. "You think you can just do this to us without consequences?" Mike challenged. The manager replied, "Given the disruption to our business, we are considering pressing charges against you." Jane and Mike were left speechless by the turn of events. It turned out Jane and Mike had been frequent visitors, often causing trouble. They had a reputation for complaining about the food and disturbing other patrons. Although their behavior had been overlooked before because they were related to me, the manager made it clear that this would no longer be tolerated. "Since they're related to my family, we've been lenient, but we won't hesitate to take action now," the manager said, addressing me. "Is that all right with you, Nancy?" "Of course," I replied. Jane and Mike stared in astonishment. It turned out my brother Jason had recently become the owner of the restaurant. He had been in France and couldn't attend my wedding, so while Jane and Mike knew about him, they had never met him. Jason, however, recognized them from the photos I had sent of my husband's family. "I'm sorry," Jason said, addressing Jane and Mike with a firm but polite tone. "I wasn't able to celebrate with you at the wedding," I began. "I wanted to approach you several times, but you always seemed to be with someone else." Jane and Mike looked at me with sheer disbelief. Sensing that this conversation might take a while, Kathy and Meg suggested to their husbands that they head home first. After seeing them off, they turned back to us, their smiles masking serious expressions. "Can we hear the details?" Kathy asked, her gaze intense. I was taken aback by Kathy and Meg's seriousness, a side of them I hadn't seen before. Mike attempted to explain. "Well, it was a meeting with colleagues from the industry. This restaurant is quite popular, so we decided to try it out." Just then, a staff member approached Mike, handing him a pair of earrings. "You left these behind during your last visit," the staff member said. Kathy raised an eyebrow and teased, "Were you dining with men who wear these?" I chuckled and replied, "It's not like that, Kathy. Mike has been having an affair with a woman who works at a nearby flower shop." Mike's face turned pale. "How did you find out?" he asked, shocked. "I hired a detective some time ago," I explained. My suspicions were confirmed. They frequently met at this restaurant, which was their favorite spot. I even have photographic evidence of their meetings. Mike, no longer trying to hide his affair, said, "I truly love her. Marrying you was a mistake. I'm ready for a divorce." His response was a relief to me as I had been considering divorce myself. "Fine, but make sure to pay the alimony," I replied. "No problem," Mike said confidently. "I recently landed a big business deal, so money isn't a concern." "That's good to hear," I said. Turning to Jane, who had remained quiet until now, I added, "And as for you, Jane, until recently you had been seeing someone for about 5 years, but your husband only passed away a year ago, right?" Jane's agitation was clear. Kathy and Meg, visibly injured, glared at their mother. They had been closer to their father and were likely upset by this revelation. What surprised me was that the detective knew so much about Jane because my father-in-law had hired him as well. I couldn't help but chuckle at the coincidence. "Did you really deceive our father for so long? And Mike, how could you betray such a lovely woman like Nancy?" Kathy and Meg exclaimed, their eyes filled with a mix of sadness, surprise, and anger. The growing awareness of other customers around us made it clear that continuing this conversation was becoming difficult. We proposed reconvening on another date and more private setting as I left the restaurant. I shared smiles with Jason and the other staff members, savoring a moment of joy and accomplishment. My brother later told me that many regular patrons were at the restaurant that day, and after the troublesome guests were evicted, the staff received applause from the other diners. Jason had only booked a table for 7 in advance, making our plan a flawless success. As a result, Mike and Jane would no longer be welcome at my brother's restaurant. A few days later, we held a private family meeting where, in front of Kathy and Meg, Mike and I signed our divorce papers. Mike coldly declared, "I don't care what happens from here on out." Jane lamented, "I can't believe such a troublesome Nancy was my son's wife, especially when I'm supposedly unable to walk." To cut off her endless complaints, I snapped, "Jane, watch your feet." To my surprise, Jane, who had claimed difficulty walking, leaped up, revealing that her leg had fully recovered. Her so-called pain was a mere act of retaliation against me. Her frequent outings despite her alleged pain had raised my suspicions, and it was clear she was deceitful to the end. But now she was someone I had no time for. Thus my short-lived marriage ended without regrets. The alimony was deposited into my account as promised. Whether Mike had to pay his mistress or not was irrelevant to me. In the aftermath, despite the hefty alimony that plunged him into debt, Mike reportedly broke up with his mistress shortly after our divorce. Kathy later told me that the woman was notorious in the local community for causing trouble with married men. Moreover, the significant business deal Mike had boasted about also fell through. His reputation suffered greatly after the commotion at Jason's restaurant, and word of the incident spread to his business associates. Given the importance of trust in their industry, the impending contract was soon rescinded. It was all a consequence of his own actions, and his professional future looked bleak. As for Jane, she was also abandoned by her male companion. After seeking medical attention for health concerns, she discovered that her excessive salt intake was the cause of her problems, and maintaining good health would now be a challenge for her. Her dietary habits over the years have led to this unfortunate outcome. I returned to work at the Western-style restaurant I had previously resigned from. Despite the trouble I had caused, my former colleagues welcomed me back warmly. Kathy, Meg, and my niece Jessica occasionally came to dine, cheering me on. They had completely cut ties with Mike and Jane, unable to forgive their actions, especially given their respect for my late father-in-law and their desire to protect me. Despite the ups and downs, I have reclaimed some of the most enjoyable and valuable moments of my life as a chef. I'm now leading a truly fulfilling life. An ambulance? No, we can't call one, my husband shouted, panic evident in his voice. After years apart, we had finally reunited with Naomi, and in her arms was a small child. As I looked closer, it became clear that Naomi was noticeably pregnant. The unexpected situation left my mind blank for a moment, but I quickly realized they needed help. That's when Naomi made a special request. "My name is Mary, and I'm 60 years old. I now assist my husband, Isaac, who works as a potter. After graduating from college, I worked as a general office clerk. However, I met Isaac through a pottery event. The event displayed and sold pottery, and there was also an area where you could try your hand at pottery making. Though I had little interest in pottery at the time, a poster at the city hall caught my eye, so I decided to visit. As I wandered around, I found the pottery experience area and learned pottery from Isaac. The experience sparked a deep fascination with pottery in me, and I began visiting his home and workshop to see more of his work. Isaac remembered me, and each time we met, we had engaging conversations. Eventually, our relationship transformed from craftsman and customer to lovers, and after 3 years of dating, we married. Isaac always encouraged me to pursue what I loved, but I was so captivated by pottery that I decided to support his work. By the time we married, his parents had already retired from pottery, which made me even more determined to stand by his side. Amidst all this, we were blessed with a daughter, whom we named Naomi. We showered her with love and affection. When Naomi was 3, Isaac and I wanted her to appreciate the charm of pottery, so we took her to the workshop and let her touch and shape the clay. Naomi showed a natural talent, creating beautiful pieces and taking great joy in her work. As she grew, she expressed a desire to continue the family business, brightening our future even more. Isaac had several apprentices who were all kind and welcoming to the idea of Naomi working there in the future. After graduating high school, Naomi went on to university where she studied not only pottery but also Japanese history and cultural arts. On holidays and days off from class, she helped with the family business, honing her skills. Thanks to Isaac's guidance from a young age, her talents developed impressively, astonishing everyone around her. However, Naomi never became arrogant. Instead, she continued her efforts to spread the charm of pottery throughout Japan, working closely with her disciples. 5 years passed since Naomi graduated from university, and as she approached 30, we often marveled at how quickly she had grown. Then one day, Naomi shared some surprising news. "Mom, I'm getting married." Married? I exclaimed in shock at her sudden announcement. Naomi had a boyfriend since her university days, and while I had anticipated that they might eventually marry, hearing the news still left me speechless. His name was Sean. I had spoken with him several times and felt he was a very good person. Later, Naomi explained the circumstances leading up to their marriage. It seems he had first proposed right after she graduated, but at the time she wanted to focus on continuing the family's pottery business and asked him to wait a little longer. Sean respected her wishes and continued to propose over the years. Time passed, and one day when Naomi felt ready to make a decision, she opened her social media and saw photos of her classmates with their children. Seeing their happiness, she realized it might be time for her to marry too. Everyone's married with children, and I'm still not, she thought to herself. After reflecting on it, she decided, I want to marry Sean. If that's your choice, we have nothing against it, I told her. Thank you, she replied. Naomi had set a few conditions before accepting Sean's proposal. She wanted to continue working as before and wasn't considering having children for a while. While her classmates with children seemed happy, she wished to maintain her current lifestyle even after marrying. Sean agreed, and they decided to move forward with the marriage. However, I knew that inevitable changes in lifestyle might arise, and Naomi could find some of these unknown changes confusing. I heard that their new home would be near ours, and I wanted to offer as much support as possible. Feel free to ask us about anything, I told her. Yes, thank you so much, Naomi replied. The reality of my daughter getting married was still sinking in, and I felt a mix of excitement and nerves when Naomi talked about it. But after hearing her thoughts, I was relieved to know she had made a well-considered decision. I had been hoping Naomi would build a happy family, but this marriage would soon reveal Sean's true character, drastically altering her once joyful life. After leaving home, Naomi started a new life with Sean, and even after their marriage, she frequently returned to her parents' home, allowing us to maintain the close relationship we always had. However, about 6 months into the marriage, we were suddenly informed that they would be moving far away due to a transfer from Sean's company. Sean had known about the potential transfer before marrying Naomi, but had kept it a secret, likely fearing she would leave him if she knew. This revelation made me doubt Sean and wonder if he genuinely considered Naomi's feelings. I asked her, "Are you sure this is okay? Isn't it possible for him to go alone?" Naomi replied that she had suggested staying behind to continue her job, but Sean insisted that he needed her with him. She decided to comply with his request, remembering how he had cared for her in the past. I chose to remain silent, and soon after, Naomi and Sean moved away, leaving me deeply saddened. The students and I, who had spent so much time together with her, felt her absence acutely, which only reaffirmed her importance to us. Half a year later, on what seemed like an ordinary day, I received an astonishing call from Naomi. She had given birth to a child. This was my first grandchild, and while I was overjoyed, questions began to arise. Considering the timing of their move, she must have been pregnant when they left. She had previously mentioned not wanting children for a while, so what changed her mind? And why decide to have a child knowing they were moving? These thoughts began to spread through my mind. When I asked about Naomi's well-being, she assured me everything was fine. If she said it was all right, I felt it wasn't my place to worry further. I ended the call by reminding her that she could always return home if needed. After discussing the situation with Isaac, we concluded that since Sean seemed to be harboring doubts, but Naomi insisted everything was fine, it was better not to pry too deeply. We decided to stay in touch, ready to act immediately if anything happened. However, since the birth of our grandchild, we had received no news and our worry began to grow. When I couldn't bear it any longer, I tried to contact her, but it was Sean, not Naomi, who answered the phone. Sean, where's Naomi? She's in the bath right now. I see, I understand, I replied, though I felt uneasy. After Naomi became a full-time housewife and started her new life, I tried calling her cell phone during the day but got no response. When I called again at night, it was Sean who answered, saying Naomi was in the bath, and I couldn't speak to her. I couldn't understand why Sean was always the one answering when I was clearly calling Naomi's number. Why is it always you answering? I call during the day, and nobody picks up. She's in the bath, I told you, he replied, even in the daytime, I don't know. I was shocked and lost for words at Sean's defiant response. Sensing my silence, he quickly ended the call. Since then, each time I tried to reach her, Sean would come up with reasons like, the baby is crying, so please stop calling, or, isn't this getting a bit excessive? My suspicion toward Sean only grew, but I was completely taken aback when I finally heard the reason behind his attitude. The truth is, Naomi doesn't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Could you please stop calling? He said. What? Why would she say that? Are you sure this is really what Naomi wants? Your parenting was too strict. She's actually been wanting to leave for a while. She had her apprentices and couldn't easily break away, but now she's out and truly happy. That can't be. Do you think we're deceiving you? Don't you find it strange that your calls don't connect during the day? Naomi is avoiding contact with you. It's about time you understand that. I was utterly shocked. I was at a loss for words, stunned into silence as Sean continued, can't you tell by my attitude? Let me be clear, we're bothered by you. I wondered when you'd realize it, but you're incredibly oblivious. If you had noticed from the start, you'd have seen that Naomi never suffered as much as you think. You're too slow to notice anything. That's your answer, so please don't contact us again, he said, and then hung up the phone. Wait, just a moment, I called out, but my words didn't reach him. After the call ended, I was left with nothing but a sense of emptiness. I tried calling again the next day at noon, but it seemed Sean had blocked my calls, likely to shield Naomi. Reflecting on Sean's past behavior and statements, I began to understand. Was Naomi truly afraid of us? The thought alone made sadness well up within me. When my husband Isaac returned home, I explained the situation about Sean and Naomi. He looked just as sad and lost for words as I was. So we should probably not get involved anymore, right? He asked. Yes, I replied, the reality sinking in. I never imagined Naomi was going through such hard times. We fully believed Sean's story and decided not to contact Naomi anymore. 4 years passed and our family business thrived. Our works found buyers one after another. Our income and fame grew, and not just us, but our apprentices also celebrated the success. As time passed, some apprentices left to become independent, others joined, and we even found a successor to continue the family business, bringing us some peace of mind. However, we never forgot about Naomi. We were constantly worried about her well-being and safety, but we restrained ourselves, not wanting to scare her further, and avoided contact. Then, on an unbelievable day, an intense typhoon struck. As the wind and rain intensified, we took a break from work and stayed home. It had been a while since we could spend time together as a couple during a storm. Late into the night, while we were asleep, the doorbell suddenly rang, waking us up. It must have been around 1:00 a.m. Who could it be at this time of night? Isaac wondered, turning on the light and looking at me. I don't know, I replied, feeling a mix of anxiety and curiosity. We hesitantly moved toward the entrance. Isaac, gathering his courage, opened the door, and there stood an unexpected figure. Dad, Mom. Naomi's voice trembled as she spoke. To our disbelief, it was Naomi standing there with a child in her arms, a girl who had lost consciousness, undoubtedly our granddaughter. She's still alive, but she's in critical condition, Naomi said, her voice strained. As we took a closer look at Naomi, we noticed she was visibly pregnant. Are you pregnant again? I asked, my heart racing. 9 months, she replied, her voice barely a whisper while I struggled to keep my panic in check. I quickly realized that both the baby and Naomi were in immediate danger. Before diving into the details, I knew the most important thing was to get them to the hospital as soon as possible. Naomi, desperate and scared, pleaded, please call an ambulance. However, Isaac, caught off guard by the intensity of the situation, refused her request. What are you talking about? There's no way I can call one in this storm, he exclaimed, his frustration slipping out. But then, seeing the fear in Naomi's eyes, he softened. It's okay, I'll take you to the emergency room tonight. Unfortunately, Isaac had already been drinking and couldn't drive, so I stepped in. I quickly prepared the car and drove Naomi and her child to the hospital myself. Thankfully, we arrived swiftly, and she was able to receive the urgent medical attention she needed. The diagnosis was severe malnutrition for both Naomi and her child. They were immediately hospitalized and began receiving treatment. Thankfully, there was no major impact on the baby, and we felt a momentary relief, knowing they were in good hands. We decided to wait until Naomi had recovered before asking her for the full story. As we arrived at the hospital, Naomi lost consciousness during the examination. While waiting for Isaac to bring clothes for Naomi and her child, I stayed by her side, watching over her as she lay unconscious. The nurses assured me they would take care of her grandchild, which lightened my heart a bit. Looking at Naomi, I noticed the deep fatigue etched into her face. The dark shadows under her eyes told the story of sleepless nights and relentless stress. I had no idea what had happened to her after they moved, but it was clear that she had been through an overwhelming amount of hardship. I quietly watched over Naomi as she slept. Just after 11 a.m., she finally opened her eyes. "Mom," she murmured. "Naomi?" I responded softly, relieved to see her awake. She looked slightly better than yesterday, perhaps due to the rest, but I still couldn't shake the worry. I called the nurse to inform them that Naomi had woken up, and after the doctor examined her, she returned to her room. I approached her quietly, unsure of how to begin. "Naomi, are you okay?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She offered a calm smile and replied, "Yes, I'm fine. Thank you, Mom." "I'm relieved to hear that, but you really gave us a scare." "I'm sorry, Mom. I must have troubled Dad too. He must have been shocked." "We were shocked, but that doesn't matter. We're just worried about you." Naomi didn't seem afraid of us. Instead, she looked relieved. As she lay in bed, we continued our conversation. To us, she was still our beloved daughter, even though she had become Sean's wife. As parents, we couldn't stop worrying about why she had arrived in such an exhausted state and why she had come in the middle of the night. But we hesitated to pry too deeply, so I decided to wait until Naomi was ready to talk on her own. It was okay if she didn't say anything. Her feelings were our priority. As days passed, Naomi visibly regained her energy and began to smile more often. The tension of our reunion after so many years transformed into a sense of relief as she started to open up to us. One day, while visiting Naomi's hospital room with Isaac, we noticed she had a serious, contemplative look on her face. Curious about what was on her mind, we decided to act as usual, though her smile suggested something was different. Eventually, Naomi spoke up, her voice earnest. "Can I talk about what happened after I moved?" We were surprised by her sudden words, but it seemed Naomi had resolved to share her story. "Of course. If you want to talk, we're here to listen," I assured her. "Thanks. Then I'll begin." As Naomi started her story, we were astounded by what she revealed. Apparently, Sean was not the person she had thought he was. She had accepted his proposal, believing it would lead to happiness. After years of being in a relationship, she thought she knew him well. But after marrying him, she discovered his true nature. Sean was incredibly possessive, demanding her full attention at all times. He isolated her from her friends, prohibited her from doing anything outside of household chores, and forbade her from leaving the house. He even confiscated her smartphone, cutting off all her means of communication with the outside world. The last time Naomi had informed me about the birth of our grandchild was just before he seized her phone. "Why didn't you seek help earlier?" I asked, shocked. Naomi explained that she thought it would be futile. Sean had convinced her that we despised her and that he was the only one she could rely on. Admitting this left Naomi visibly shaken, and I felt a surge of sadness and anger on her behalf. Naomi had developed a deep fear of us, exacerbated by the severe restrictions imposed on her life. She wasn't allowed proper sleep and was given only a single piece of bread for her daily meal. Even the times she could use the bathroom were strictly controlled, and she wasn't permitted to leave her room outside those times. The extremity of her situation became evident from her harrowing account. Overwhelmed with guilt for raising her child in such dire conditions, Naomi resolved to flee. After seeing her child sleep lifelessly, she was driven by the desperate need to provide a better life. Despite believing her family might dislike her, she decided to return to her hometown for help. Acting swiftly, she sneaked out of the house and caught the last train to reach us. Hearing her confession made everything fall into place. To ensure she wasn't just afraid of us, we asked, and she shook her head in response. "He was lying to you too," she said. I replied, "It's easy to believe what you're told. I'm sorry I didn't notice anything sooner." We then contacted the police and filed a report. A female officer came to the hospital to gather details, and the police immediately raided Sean's house. However, he had already fled, likely in search of Naomi. The police increased patrols around the hospital and our home, anticipating his return. Weeks later, Naomi gave birth while still hospitalized and was discharged with her child. We breathed a sigh of relief at the arrival of the new life. With the family business left in the capable hands of apprentices and Isaac back at home, we felt more secure. Although the situation remained precarious, seeing Naomi smile like she used to filled us with happiness. We deeply hope for these peaceful days to continue, but reality often defies our expectations. One seemingly peaceful afternoon, while preparing lunch, a sudden noise came from the second floor where no one was supposed to be. Isaac, who had been relaxed, noticed the sound and said, "I'll go check upstairs." We would have ignored such a noise before, but ever since Naomi's incident, we had been living on high alert. I told Naomi and her children to stay close and watch for any signs of trouble, clutching my smartphone. Then a shout echoed from the second floor, "What are you doing?" It was clear there was a scuffle with an intruder.